All right, I think we are rolling. Hello, my name is Travis T. Warren, and I'm going to share my testimony today. Actually, had a buddy hit me up on Facebook, and he just asked me. He kind of knew my backstory, and he asked if I'd share it, and with the hopes of reaching other people. And I said, absolutely. I feel like even though I'm a musician and music is something I love doing, I feel like my passion, my real passion, is to help other people, whether they're dealing with addiction, past traumas and abuses, whatever the case may be. Hopefully, I pray that my story relates to others, and I'll try to condense this as much as I can. I haven't really made any footnotes or bullet points. I just kind of I just go off the top of my head. Whoever gets this video, if you want to edit it and chop it down, you're more than welcome to, as long as you don't take things out of context. But with that said, like I said, my name is Travis T. Warren. I sing for the band Blind Melon. Some of you guys out there may know the band. I was a huge fan of the band growing up. I was the classic kid. I'm a product of the 90s, and I had posters of Blind Melon and Nine Inch Nails and Tool, Rage Against the Machine, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all those bands on my wall. And Blind Melon, I first got the record, I think I was 12 years old, and fell in love with the album. Not just the hit song No Rain, but the actual album. I'm a guitar player first and foremost, and I just thought the guitars nobody sounded like them. Nobody sounded like Shannon Hoon, the original singer. He had his own unique voice, and in a time of grunge music, he was doing something completely different with his voice, and I just gravitated towards that. But anyhow, I'm going to kind of back up a little bit and, maybe get into the reasons why I got into music and everything else. My backstory is probably not very typical. At least the older I got, I realized it wasn't. It was normal to me growing up because that's all I knew. But the fact of the matter, it wasn't very normal. And my dad was many years older than my mom. My mom had me when she was like 18 or 19. And my dad was much older. And within the first 6 months, my mom left my dad and pretty much just gave me to my dad. She couldn't take care of me. She was too young and all that. And so my dad was a musician. He was gone a lot. He was touring and doing his own thing. And my dad, still to this day, is one of the most gifted people. I mean, he passed away about 7 years ago, but the most gifted person I know. One of the best guitar players I've ever known. Amazing songwriter, and he just happened to be my dad. But as creative and talented as he was also bananas. My dad was a paranoid schizophrenic. So he was in and out of mental institutions while I was growing up. So that had a lot of impact on me, seeing that, going into different hospitals and seeing your dad in that state of mind and seeing other people who had mental issues. It was tough. It was tough to see that. And I also dealt with sexual abuse when I was a kid, which is something I didn't even admit out public until I was about 27 years old. I was in rehab, and I was always ashamed and embarrassed of that. I thought it, made me who I was, which it didn't. It took me years to figure that out. But I think with all the different traumas and abuses that I suffered as a kid, and the abandonment issues, and my dad just going off the rocker, things like shooting shotguns in our living room, blowing holes in our ceiling. I mean, he was nuts. And I think it was a pretty natural process for me to gravitate towards sex and drugs and rock and roll at a young age. I think a lot of people do that. And I started playing guitar at a really young age, about 7 years old. by the time I was like 10, 11, I was doing it constantly. If I wasn't in school, I was in my room practicing guitar. And then when I hit about 12 or 13 years old, I started hanging out with other kids who, in retrospect, I think they had their own traumas and abuses that they were running from. So we all naturally gravitated towards, smoking pot and drinking. It was easy for me to get pot because I just steal it from my dad. And, started drinking booze at a young age, and that progressed. By the time we were about 14, we got into hallucinogenics, to psilocybin mushrooms and LSD and ecstasy, and then it was methamphetamines, it was crank, and then by the time I was about 16, we really started getting into pills. That's what I really liked was the opiates, and it just kind of progressed from there. And then I dropped out of school the first 6 weeks of my freshman year. I had skipped so many days in my freshman year within those first 6 weeks that I already had failed for the year. School wasn't my thing. I didn't really care about it. I went there to flirt with girls and to hang out with friends, and that was it. I didn't care about any of that. And so by that point, I didn't really have any proper parental guidance. I was living with my grandbo, and I think she kind of let me get away with anything because she knew that things weren't great for me, and I didn't have a stable environment. And so I think she was a great supporter of music. She bought me my first half stack and pedals, and she was very supportive of my music, and I'm very grateful for that. And but dropped out at school my freshman year. By the time about a month after I turned 17, I split with a buddy of mine. We went on about a week binger on methamphetamines, and I started dating a girl out in Amarillo. I grew up in the Panhandle of Texas, and I had dated her for about a year, and she moved out to California, back to California, where she's from. And she was gone, I don't know, like 2 weeks or something, and I couldn't stand it. I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got to follow her out to California, which is what I did. And I sold my half stack and a lot of my electric guitar stuff to get the gas money to make it out to California. Packed my bags, and I remember telling my Grambo, we called her Grambo, by the way, because she was tough as nails. She was like Rambo. She was brutal. And the most amazing person I've ever known in my life. Anyhow, I had packed my bags and grabbed my 12-string acoustic guitar and I think my CDs. And she's like, "Well, Trav, where are you going?" And I think I told her I'm going to Fritch to go fishing or something. And she knew that wasn't true. And I just remember her kind of looking at the ground, and she's just like, "Well, I love you, Trav, and take care of yourself." And I think she knew I wasn't coming back, and I didn't. And I was California bound, and like I said, a month after I turned 17 years old, that would have been in 1997, and made it out to California. And I think, by the time I was 17, by that point, I was using every day. It went from like a weekend warrior type thing, By the time I was 14 or 15 years old, my friends and I were using on a regular basis. I was not just smoking pot before school. We would eat acid before school. I mean, we were constantly using. So by the time I was 17, I was drinking every day, smoking pot every day if I had it, and pills and anything else I could get my hands on. So I think there were, subconsciously or deep inside, I thought, I'll move out to California and I'll kind of hit reset, find a new group of friends, and really pursue my music and stop using. Little did I know, I was already an addict at that point. I didn't think that you could be an addict at 17 years old. I thought that, that was for old people, old fat drunks, I didn't realize that I had already had a problem and I couldn't stop doing it. And of course, when I made it out to California and started finding other friends and people in music, I realized that they partied exactly how all my friends did out in Texas. So I basically left one group of friends in Texas and joined the same group of friends in California and continued doing the same thing. And my alcohol intake became even more. And like I said, I was so uncomfortable in my own skin that any way to escape and to get out of my own skin, I did. And by the time I hit about 19 years old, I really started to get anxiety really bad and depression, and I'd go through these episodes where I'd be out of commission with depression for 3 or 4 days, couldn't leave my room, just bedbound. And so right about the time I was 18, 19 years old, I started getting on doctor drugs, like Paxil and Zoloft and Wellbutrin and Effexor and Cymbalta and Lexapro and all those. And they never really fix the problem because they're not designed to fix the problem. They're there to mask the symptoms. Of course, the doctors don't tell you that. They're like, here's a magic pill that doesn't exist. Let me write you this up. And it seemed like all the pills had side effects. Some made me fat. Some made me super and I didn't want to be very creative. It curbed my creativity, and some curbed my sexual drive, and they all just had weird side effects. So I would I'd tell my doctor that, and they'd put me on a new one. But like I said, they never seem to fix the problem because they're not designed to fix the problem. And I think from an early age, constantly looking for a magic pill that didn't exist. And so as the years progressed, I will say this before I go further, that I believe music for me kept me out of a lot of trouble. I have a lot of friends that ended up in penitentiaries and prison, jail. A lot of them ended up in rehabs and on the streets. And I was very fortunate to avoid a lot of that. And I think the main reason why is because I had such a passion for music. Music kept me out of a lot of trouble. Had I not had that, it's like that saying, idle hands does the devil's work. Boredom, man, that can get you in a lot of trouble. So I'm very grateful to God for him giving me that gift to play music. So that definitely kept me out of a lot of trouble. It didn't keep me away from drugs and alcohol, but it did keep me out of a lot of other things I could have got myself into. So I was like I said, I was very passionate to music at a young age. I was just extremely passionate. I had a deep love for it and just studied it and loved it. Anything I could get my hands on that was based on music. And so as the years progressed, I started to get into bands out in California, and some of those bands got pretty big in the area that I lived in. And by the time I think when I was 22, I shot heroin for the first time. And for me, and like a lot of heroin addicts, once I got turned on to heroin, that was my drug. That is the drug that I went, okay, cool. I have to feel anxiety or pain or any of that trauma that's constantly there, making me so uncomfortable in my own skin. And of course, when you start using heroin, you don't realize that, it ends up becoming like your medicine, and you become a slave to it. I think had I known that, maybe I would have avoided it, maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. But once heroin hit, that opened up a whole other door to many more problems. And now what happens is, where music used to be the priority, the main focus, and that drive to try to make it, and for music, now your priorities start to shift, and music takes a back seat, and now it's, I got to find drugs. And once you become addicted to opiates, that becomes, like I said earlier, that becomes your medicine, and you have to have it. So then the priorities get moved around, and now drugs take the number one spot, and then it's music and everything else. But like I said, the bands I was in progressed. We got bigger, we got more popular. And then when I was about 25 years old, the band that I was in at the time decided to move to Los Angeles. And we moved down, and within just a couple of months, we got management. It doesn't matter. We got a pretty big manager, and things just started happening for us really quick. And started showcasing for major labels within just a few months of being down in Los Angeles. And even in that respect, that's not very common. A lot of bands out of Los Angeles usually, they're doing that grind for a couple years before they start to get noticed by labels. And for us, it was really quick. And we weren't even from Los Angeles. What we were doing, we were originally from the Central Coast of California, and when we would play showcases and venues down in Los Angeles, we would rent these big buses up here in the Central Coast, and we would load all of our fans, in these buses, and we'd have like kegs of beer on there, and you for a certain amount of money you could get your ticket to our show. Beer. There's a designated driver, and so we would drive them down to Los Angeles and fill these venues up. And of course, the A&R people didn't know that's what we were doing. They just thought we had this fan base in Los Angeles. Looking back at it now, it's kind of a genius plan. It wasn't my plan, but we got noticed fairly quickly. But by the time I was 25 and living in Los Angeles, man, I had a serious drug problem and alcohol problem. And it became to the point where anything I did, it didn't matter if it was like a show or a party or, practicing the guitar, whatever it was, I had to be on something. I'm going out, I better have, this is my cocktail, I need this, and this to even go out and be social. And at that point, I think I knew I had a problem with it, but I was in total denial. And I became a full-on slave at that point. So during this process, this would have been about 2005, 2006, I met an A&R guy at Atlantic Records, and one day he was asking me about my influences, and I mentioned Shannon Hoon, the original singer for Blind Melon, amongst other singers and guitar players, and he's like, no kidding, he's like, I know those guys in Blind Melon. They actually have a studio in Burbank. He said something along the lines, would you like to meet them? And of course, for me, I thought that was rhetorical. I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'm ready now. And I think by the end of that week, we met up and ended up going over to their studio in Burbank. And that was my introduction into meeting the Blind Melon guys. And kind of make a long story short, just within a couple of months of that initial meeting, they started producing me. And shortly after that, they asked if I would be into singing for Blind Melon. Of course, for me, being asked to sing for one of your childhood favorite bands was a dream come true, as it would be for most people. Unfortunately, though I was excited, I couldn't really fully grasp the potentialness of that. I couldn't really understand the magnitude of the situation, and I couldn't truly enjoy it because I was a slave to drugs and alcohol and a slave to my own head. And I should have been over the moon, as most people would be. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's only a very small group of people on this planet who've actually got to experience something like that, to get to sing for one of your favorite bands growing up. Not a lot of people get to do that. It's a very unique situation. And so we started working on a record together in 2007, and of course by that point I just turned 27 years old, and I had a full-on issue. At that point it was with Oxycontins. And I thought, and then this is an addict mentality. I thought, well, if I'm not doing heroin and I'm just doing oxys, that's okay. And of course, I started to nod off on the oxys. So then I had to start. I thought if I wasn't doing speed and just doing cocaine, that's okay. I would just try to justify As long as I wasn't doing those, white trash drugs, like methamphetamine, I'm okay. This is classic addict mentality. And, of course, by that point, by the time I was 27, there's a great line in a movie. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along the lines of drugs are great when you're doing them, but once the drugs start doing you, it's time to hang the hat up. And that's really what happened to me. I started to nod off during meetings and things with my band, and they knew that I had a problem. And of course, putting yourself in their shoes, they lost Shannon Hoon, their original singer, to a drug overdose in October of '95. So they had already been down this road. So here they are, another opportunity with another singer who knew that catalog. I grew up, like I said, I was a huge fan of the band, so I knew that entire catalog, their albums, like the back of my hand. I knew I could do that job. I was very confident, even being a massive drug addict. I had confidence in that. But here they are with another opportunity, and now you have another singer who's following the exact same, in the same footsteps as their original singer. So as you could imagine, they get terrified, and I go to rehab during the making of our For My Friends record. And I actually learned a lot going to rehab. Like I said earlier, that was the first time I'd ever mentioned that I was sexually abused as a kid, and just admitting that in public, a lot of weight lifted off. A lot of shame had left, just admitting it. And what I realized is in this particular rehab that I was at, I think something like 80% or something like that of the people in there had all been sexually abused, which is interesting in itself if you think about it. There was that commonality, and I believe one of the main contributing factors of why we gravitated towards drugs and alcohol in the first place. And though I learned a lot in rehab, I don't think I had really truly hit my bottom. I didn't really hit my bottom. And so while I was in rehab, this had been early 2007, they actually let me finish writing the lyrics and doing the record while I was in rehab. They were cool enough, the facility that I was at, they let me bring in my recording gear, my laptop and a microphone, a little preamp, just a little pro audio setup. And the room that I was staying in, I had 3 other roommates in a tiny little room, and we had one closet with 4 people putting all their stuff in this one closet. And my roommates were cool enough to let me bring in my recording rig and put it in that closet, and that's where I finished writing the lyrics to the For My Friends record that came out in late 2007. Unfortunately, I didn't finish the program. The band wanted to get out on the road, and I should have finished the rehab program and then done a sober and outpatient program, like sober living, for like 6 months to really learn how to do things sober, and I didn't do that. And I'm not blaming the band or anything. I don't think I was ready at that point anyway, at 27 years old. So we hit the road late 2007, and I believe the first show that we played, I think it was in Providence, Rhode Island. I believe I drank the very first show. So I was back on it. And of course, as an addict, you're like, well, I'm just going to drink booze. I'll just drink beer. Of course, I don't think I started with beer because that always made me bloaty before I sang. So I think I'm like, I'll have 2 Jack and Cokes or, a screwdriver or something. And you're justifying. As long as I stick to that, it'll be fine. Next thing you notice, I'm smoking pot with fans. And then I'm like, well, it's an herb and it grows out of the ground. It's okay. Willie Nelson smokes it. It's fine. And, so then it was alcohol and pot. Now, all of a sudden, I'm eating ecstasy. And I'm looking, I'm scouting the fan base. Hey, man, what do you got? Now, well, as long as it's ecstasy. I mean, they do that at music festivals, man. It's a hippity-dippity thing. Screw it. As long as it's not heroin, I'm fine. And that just kept progressing. And the next thing you notice, I get super drunk. And then I'm looking for cocaine or speed to wake me up because I'm just, super drunk, and within just a couple of months, I'm right back to doing what I was doing before I went to rehab. So Of course, what happened after I had gone into rehab, the dynamic of the band changed. It went from we were hanging out, going to bars, drinking. I was even doing certain drugs with certain guys in the band. It went from that to when they knew I had a problem with it, and I went into rehab. The dynamic changed in that band. So it went from us being like brothers, getting to know one another, to where they were almost like a father figure, or like the cops, where they put a sober coach to watch me, out on the road. And so that really divided me and the rest of the guys in the band. And I started to isolate and not hang out with those guys because I was using. So the shame that comes with that, and deep down knowing I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing. So I just isolated from those guys, when what should have been happening is we should have been getting closer together as a band. And I don't blame them for that, because I think, like I said earlier, they had already gone through that particular issue with Shannon, their original singer. So they were terrified. They just didn't want another singer to die, out on the road. So they became overly protective and very paranoid, and rightfully so. And the more they did that, the more I closed up and isolated. So I think that did a lot of damage to the growth of our friendship. And so this progressed, and I would go through little episodes where I wouldn't be taking any street drugs, but I'd be on Suboxone, which is an opiate blocker to get off of opiates. And even though it wasn't a street drug, the fact of the matter is I was always on something. And that I'd be on Suboxone for a while, and then I'd get off that, and then I'd start eating hydrocodones, and I'd end up right back on heroin. I would always think that I could maintain my drug use or my alcoholism, and then of course most addicts think that way, and then it just turned around, and I was sabotaging deals, music things, my career. I was sabotaging tons of relationships because you don't follow through with anything. I was making plans when I was super drunk or high on drugs. Yeah, man, I'll do whatever you want. Yeah, you're telling everybody yes, but then you don't follow through with it. Either A, you wake up and you don't remember making these plans with people, or you're so hungover or whatever that you don't even answer your phone, and you just totally flake out on people. So I was sabotaging a lot. And of course I hit my 30s, and I kept battling this drug problem and this alcohol problem, and I kept trying to do things my own way. And every time I would try to do things my own way, I ended up in the gutter. Every single time. Sometimes that would take a couple of months. Sometimes it would take 6 months. Other times it would take a year. But ultimately, I would end up in a hole because of drugs and alcohol. And so, sometime, I think 35, 36 years old, it would have been 2015, 2016, I get back on heroin and methamphetamines. And this little cocktail lasted about 2 years. Except the difference is this last time, things were a lot different. Like, I wasn't being really creative. That last run I did on drugs, I wasn't a happy drug addict. By that point, I was miserable, and I was still feeling anxiety and depression, and the drugs just weren't working like they did, 2 decades before that. And suicidal thoughts got worse for me. Depression got worse. The anxiety got way worse. And the end of 2017, I had hit my bottom. It's just one of those things. I knew it. I wasn't happy at all. And I had completely isolated at this point from my family, from friends, from my bandmates. The only people that I was really associating with were dealers. Living with my girlfriend, we didn't have a relationship. We were both kind of walking on tippy toes around one another, living in the same house. And again, a lot of that on my end was shame. I knew what I was doing was wrong. And I was hiding my drug use from her. Of course, by that point, I couldn't. And when we'd go fly out and do shows, it became a mission. Okay, where am I going to put my drugs? Where am I going to hide my drugs? Am I going to have enough drugs to last me for this tour, this run? Because if I run out on the road, it's going to be a nightmare. And if I run out, I at least need Suboxone. And it's just this, that it becomes the main focus of your life, and you can't enjoy life. It's just all about, I got to have this amount of drugs, and it's just a horrible place to be. And so the beginning of 2018, I had finally said, I'm done, because drugs, like I said earlier, they weren't doing what they used to do. I wasn't having fun. I wasn't being creative. I wasn't hanging out with friends, going to see shows. I was completely isolating in my house, diving into conspiracy theories and just endless hopelessness. So early 2018, January, right before my 38th birthday, I go in to see my doctor, and I get on a Suboxone program. And I get off drugs, slept for about a week. And during that time, I had got a hold of my band, and I was honest, because they had no idea that I was back on drugs, and I had been on drugs for about 2 years at that point. And so I had written them an email, and I just said, look, I got back on heroin and speed, and I've been on it for about 2 years, and I'm going to have to quit the band for the time being. I have to figure out something. I didn't know what that something was, but I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living the way I was living. And so during that time, I'll try to make this short. Like I said, if you want to chop this up out of here, whoever edits this is fine. I'm just kind of going, spur of the moment here. I had seen a documentary on Netflix around this time, and the gist of it was this super smart kid had depression really bad, and he had tried therapy and drugs and this and that, and nothing worked, and he was going to kill himself. And before he was going to kill himself, he had found out about this South American drug called ayahuasca. And he'd heard that it cured alcoholism and drug addiction and depression and all this. So the kid goes down, he films the process. He goes down to South America, basically takes this ayahuasca, and comes out of this trip a happier human being. So I thought, I'll do that. I'm going to fly to ayahuasca. I'm going to fly to South America, find these shamans down there, these native shamans, and take this ayahuasca, and hopefully it cures my addiction and depression and all that. So January 18th, I believe it was a Thursday, 2 days after my 38th birthday, I go in to see my doctor. And I'm telling my doctor this. I'm like, I'm going to go down to Peru, South America. I'm going to take some ayahuasca. I'm going to get buried under the ground. And then I got a fear of snakes, so I'm going to strip down to my whitey tighties. I'm going to get into the bathtub, and I'm going to have people pour snakes on me to get over this fear of snakes. And I'm telling my doctor this. And he's just kind of sitting there. He's not judging or giving me the I just smelt the fart look or anything. He's just kind of sitting there, And he said, well, hey, listen, man, maybe before you do that, why don't you come down to the Celebrate Recovery meeting tomorrow night? It's at this church down the street. And as soon as he said church, I instantly went into, my pride and ego puffed out. I'm like, church, But I was like, yeah, I'll go. I had no intentions of actually going to this thing. Didn't want to go, didn't care to go, didn't think that I didn't believe in any of that. Didn't believe in Jesus, Bible, none of it. I thought it was all garbage for old people to make them feel better before they die. Didn't believe in none of it. So the following day, which was January 19th, which was a Friday, 2018, my girlfriend, she's like, so are you ready to go? And I'm like, go where? And she's like, we're going to go to that meeting. I'm like, I'm not going to go to that crap. It ain't going to do anything for me. And once again, I'm all puffed up full of pride, thinking I know everything, and that ain't going to do squat. And she just looked at me. She said, the hell you're not. Get in the car. We're going. And that church is about 45 minutes from our house, and we literally fought from the time we left our driveway all the way over the grade to this church. And I just, saying how much this wasn't going to do anything for me and yada yada, blah, blah, blah. I know everything, and, just that whole thing. So we get into this church, and my doctor's there, and he gave me a big old hug, and he said something very interesting. Didn't think twice about it when he said it. It was only until after the fact. He said, I've only been trying to get you down here for about 5 years, but you weren't ready yet. And like I said, it kind of went in one ear and out the other until what I'm about to tell you. So we go sit down. My doctor's on the left-hand side. My girlfriend's on the right-hand side. And the worship music starts playing. And, of course, I'm a super critical musician. So I'm just like, they're singing out of key and they're off tempo. And I'm just going to critical mode. That guy, just total douche, And about the third song into their set, I never heard these songs before, didn't know Christian songs, didn't even really, I thought Christian songs were like old hymns from 1641. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about that world, nothing. But the third song into their set, something began to happen as I'm listening to the song, and I began to break down. And being a man in a room full of a bunch of people, and you start to cry, and all the guys watching this know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't like doing that. You don't want other people thinking, what's wrong with this guy? Why is he crying? Like a sad sack of apples. What is his deal? And I, in the beginning, I tried to fight these tears, and what ended up happening was years of trauma and abuse and abandonment issues and all these things that I had buried for decades just came up. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't fight it anymore. Couldn't fight these tears, man. And I cried, just bawling like a baby, dude. Like I have not cried since I was a kid. I ended up leaving that church. Feeling like a completely different person. What I wanted to add to that before I forget is whether I knew it or not, what happened in that moment was I surrendered, whether I truly knew it or not. And I was like, God, if you're real, and this really is real, I hand it over to you, because I can't keep doing things my way, because my ways get me nowhere. So if you're really there and you're real, I'm asking for your help. I left that church, like I just said a while ago. I felt like a different human being. All this weight, not to sound cliche, but that's really what it felt like, just lifted off my shoulders. And there was a peace there that I had not felt in a long, long time. And we get home, and before I go forward, I've shared my experience with Jesus before. I'm not going to get into the details on it for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is I don't want to get into the details about it. For anybody who's watching, I don't want them to think, oh, wow, that happened to you, so that's going to happen to me. Just because I had the experience I had doesn't mean that's what's going to happen to you. There are a lot of people that have had these experiences with the Holy Spirit and with Jesus Christ, and they're all unique to each one of us. The commonality there between all of us is we're getting saved through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. But each experience is unique to each individual. So I just want to state that, and is as important as the experience was, and I've had a few of them since then, they're the most transformational, most profound experiences that have ever happened to me, bar none. Nothing even comes close. Playing in front of 35,000 people doesn't even come close to that. I'm telling you, it's that amazing. As amazing as those experiences were and are, it's what happened to me after that. It's what happened to the changing of my heart and everything. So that said, we get home, we go to bed like we normally do. She's on the left-hand side. Our dog, Tesla, is down by my feet. And I wake up early morning on January 20th, which was a Saturday, 2018. And my entire body was radiating from my, it felt like it was coming out of my chest area. It was like electricity, but my entire body was consumed and radiating the most calm, most loving, most peaceful feeling that you could ever imagine. I've said this before in interviews and things. I'm an ex-heroin addict, and I thought I knew what euphoria felt like. Take that and multiply that by a few trillion, and that's what the Holy Spirit feels like. This was a whole nother level. It was a peace and just a calm. It's just indescribable. And there's not really words in the English, in the language, period, that really fully describes this feeling. And there's a lot more to that story, but what I'll conclude with on that is I came out of this experience knowing with every ounce of being in my body that Jesus Christ is not only real, but he is the Son of God. He is the Messiah. You're talking to someone who didn't believe in any of that. Listen, I got a tattoo of Buddha right here. And I didn't really even know Buddhist philosophy. I just thought, hey, he's kind of cool looking and, get a bum, that whole thing. Didn't really know much about it. But Jesus, I thought at best he was probably a cool dude that did some good things for some people. And people took it to another level. At worst, he didn't even exist. And I was wrong on both of those. And I can't tell you, I just knew. I didn't see a face. I didn't see his body. I didn't see some guy with long hair and, that the way that we picture Jesus, or the way that he's been pictured over the centuries. I just knew that he was real, and I knew that I had to give my life over to him. And I did. That was January 20th, 2018. And I was so on fire. I still am on fire about Jesus Christ. I just dove right into the Bible. I was like this thing. I was anything I could soak up, any sermons on YouTube, anything that had to do with Jesus. I dove in head first. And as I began to read the Gospels, the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, through Acts and Romans, all the way up through Jude and Revelations, as I began to read that Bible, it was just further confirmation what was actually happening to me and to my heart. I couldn't believe it. I was living what was in that book, which is when I get giddy like a kid on Christmas Day when I think about it. As I'm reading the Bible, the transformation that's talked about in the New Testament of what Jesus Christ does when you're reborn into Jesus, that was happening to me. So the Bible was just further confirmation that holy macaroni, this thing is real. God is real, Jesus Christ is real, and the Bible is the Word of God. And many people who may or may not watch this know exactly what I'm talking about. I became in love with Jesus Christ, and anything Jesus, and still I get that way. And it doesn't mean like once you give your life over to Jesus Christ, everything's just puppy dogs and ice cream. It's just a perfect little world. Matter of fact, in some respects, it's the contrary to that. Being a Christian is not easy. It's not. In a lot of ways it is, because you have an inner peace that you never had before using drugs and alcohol. But in some ways it's harder because we are Christians who live in a secularized world. Our universities are secularized, atheistic. We live in a world that isn't pro-Jesus. Matter of fact, the Bible talks about that. In those days, Christians will be persecuted. I call it slow-roasted persecution, where how Christianity is portrayed in Hollywood. Look how the average Christian is portrayed in Hollywood. They do it in a negative demeanor. Movies like The Passion of Christ wouldn't have come out had Hollywood known that that's what Mel Gibson was working on. He had to do that film in secret, by the way. I don't know if you know that or not. It's hard to be a Christian in a world of non-believers. And so not in just that aspect, but also, I started using drugs at 12, 13 years old, all the way till I was 38 years old. So, and in a lot of respects, my mentality was stunted Like a lot of, psychologists have looked into young people who do drugs, start using at a young age. A lot of them their mentality is still stuck as a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old. And that was definitely my case. Growing up the way I did, I didn't know things like patience or self-control. I get my temper just from 0 to 100 like that. If I didn't get my way, I just would become an a-hole. And I had to relearn how to be an adult, and I'm still learning that 2 years later. It is a process. And by giving your life over to God and getting sober, you start to acknowledge and recognize these things. Like, wow, I'm a selfish a-hole that needs to work on my patience and self-control and being gentle and being empathetic and being compassionate and kind to people. Being selfless and putting others first before yourself. That is a process. That doesn't just happen overnight. And, so I don't want people who may be watching this to have this false idea of like, once you give your life over to Christ, woohoo, never going to have a problem ever again. It's just going to be easy from here on out, because it's just simply not true. But you learn how to deal with things rather than escaping through drugs and alcohol. So here we are, what are we in? February 2020. I'm over 2 years sober. Not only do I not drink alcohol or do drugs or smoke pot or cigarettes, but I'm off all doctor psych meds. I'm off everything. My life consists of God, which is the most important, my relationship with him and Jesus Christ. That is the centerpiece of all of it. You take that out of the equation, everything else falls to the wayside. So that's number one. And health. Whether that's eating healthy, I'm very careful what I put in my body. If it's sugar, garbage, any of that, I don't touch it. Because my body, our bodies are our temple. So you got to really take care of that. And if I'm not eating healthy, I'm exercising. I exercise a minimum of 5 days a week, whether that's running 6 miles a day or hiking, or my girlfriend and I will go play tennis, and we don't even know the rules. We just sit and hit, but it doesn't matter. Just staying physical and doing cardio. What goes in, I'm even careful on what I watch. I watched pornography for years. In the world that I come from, that's normalized. You normalize sin. I immediately stopped watching pornography. Something about it didn't seem right. Seemed evil to me. Same thing with horror movies. I grew up, second grade, I'd seen all the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Streets and Halloweens and all that. Grew up on that. It was very normal. Now I don't watch that garbage. I believe you can't unsee things. You've got to be very careful in what you put in your mind and what you hear and what you listen to. I don't listen to a lot of music I used to listen to, like Slayer and all that stuff. It's not good to put that in your mind. And today, I'm a completely different human being. My old self literally died off. That's the whole idea of being reborn. They don't just use that term because it sounds cool. That's what happens. You die. Your old self dies off in sin, and you are reborn in Jesus' blood. That's what happens. And he transforms your heart. And you ask anybody who knows me, whether it's my family, friends, girlfriend, bandmates, anybody who knows me well will tell you I'm a different human being. Even when I'm being, music, something I love doing. It doesn't make me who I am, but it's something I enjoy doing. God gave me a gift, and that is to play music, and I love doing that. But it doesn't make me who I am. But what happened after this transformation, I gave my life over to Jesus, is I started creating music for the love of playing music. Not, because I got to make it and I got to get famous, and I need to write a hit song because of this. And that, you start doing it for other reasons other than the sake of playing music. I play music and write music because I love it. It takes me back to when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, before I started doing drugs. I'd get home from school all in the summer. That's all I did was play and practice my craft because I enjoyed doing it. I'm back to that place. And man, that's a great place to be. Not doing something because you're trying to build your career or make it or any of these things. You can get so lost in that rabbit hole that you lose the love of why you started doing what you're doing in the first place. But, I want to end on this, and I was going to play a couple songs before I end here, but I just want to end on this. Like, Jesus Christ changed me completely. I wake up and I can be content just watching the birds, the trees, or going to the beach. Things that I never could do before. Like if I was going out, I had to be stoned on pills, something, drinking, and I'd have to get my buzz on just to enjoy anything. Even listening to music, I had to get stoned. To be able to enjoy life, enjoy the simple things in life, going to concerts without using and really retaining the show and remembering every detail or a lot of the details about it. That is such a great feeling, to not be a slave to drugs and alcohol and know that there is a way out. We get caught up, and I don't want to get too much into this, but addiction is a disease, and it's always going to be a disease, and you can maintain it through meetings and different drugs, doctor drugs, but I don't subscribe to that. And I'm not trying to discredit or downplay addiction, because I know the power of it, but I truly believe that you can beat addiction through Jesus Christ. Through Jesus Christ, you can do anything. And I don't subscribe to those, popular culture slogans. Addiction is a disease. It is if you don't have Christ in your life, truly. And you're talking to someone who was addicted for 26 years of my life. I have a PhD in drug use. That's one thing I do know what I'm talking about. And for somebody to beat that for that many years, through Jesus Christ, it's incredible. And so I want to share that with people. And that hopelessness feeling, that depression, and not wanting to leave your house, and not wanting to even pick up your phone and answer your phone because you're just encapsulated, with fear. I know what that feels like, man. I was controlled by fear and insecurities for most of my life, which is the reason why I did drugs and alcohol, to cover that up. But like I said earlier, drugs don't cure the problem. They just mask the symptoms. There's a root, there's a cancer there. And once you can understand what that is, then you can start to heal. And so I'll leave it at that, man. I hope that this testimony reaches somebody out there who's struggling with addiction, who's on the fence about Jesus. I want you to know that there are people all around the world that are having these experiences with Jesus Christ from all different backgrounds. Atheists, agnostics, people into New Age, Muslims, big time Muslims, by the way. In Middle East right now, there are tons of Muslims that are having these dreams and visions of Jesus Christ and converting over to Christianity. These are not isolated cases, or 1, 2, or 5. We're talking thousands of people around the world. Buddhists, even Christians who didn't really have a real relationship with Christ, and then are having these experiences years later. This is happening all over the world. If you want to check more out on that, go to YouTube and just type in Jesus testimony and look at all the different testimonies happening. This is real. Of course, the Bible says this. In those days, people will start to have these visions, prophecies, and dreams. That is happening now. I believe, as my pastor says, God is on the move. He's on the move right now. The chess pieces are getting put in place. And I think nowadays we're living in such an incredible time, and it's more important than ever to understand what's truly at play here, and understand that, having faith in God and in Jesus isn't for weak people. It is for the exact opposite. Once you understand that He is the creator and this is real, now you're sitting at the big boys table. Now you get that you're not at a kiddie table anymore. You understand this is the real deal. So I could talk way more. I have no idea how long this is. I'm going to play a song. It's actually a song I wrote just a couple of months after I got sober, which means a lot to me. I haven't played it in a while because I've been writing a lot of new music, so hopefully I can remember the lyrics. But the song means a lot to me, and hopefully it's relatable to you guys. So here we go. It's called "The Other Side." It's been a while since I've heard so much clearness in your voice. Gotta tell you, you put a smile on my face. We were young, sort of dumb, had ourselves a lot of fun. Yet maybe we took it a little too far. I didn't think it'd take this long. Wasted years, we made our way through many wrongs. Let us toast to the things we love the most. Oh friend, we made it out the other side. We were tough, ran amok, gave ourselves some uppercuts. We got swept away down the river of our tears. Made a pact that was ours, no more needles in our arms. We found a way to march and soldier on. I didn't think we'd last this long, but we did end up being sad lyrics in a song. So let us toast to the things we love the most. Oh friend, we made it out the other side. Yeah, we did. Wasted years, we made our way through many wrongs. Let us toast to the things we love the most. Oh friend, we made it out the other side. So let us toast to the things we love the most. Oh friend, made it out the other side. Oh friend, we made it out the other side. I was gonna play one more song for you. This is actually the first song I wrote after I got sober, and means it's very special to me. It's one of my favorite songs that I've written, at least in recent times. And of course, after I got sober, especially within the first 6-8 months, I started to really realize how selfish I had been, especially to my girlfriend. I was the type of person, I'd walk in, I'd see a bunch of dishes, and I'd be like, oh, Tara will do it. She'll take care of it. Or, laundry. I'm like, oh, she'll take care of it. I didn't clean. I didn't do nothing. I was just that guy. And like I said, after I got sober, I started to do more around, and not because I felt like I needed to, but because I wanted to. And so throughout that process, I ended up writing this song. And so I call this song Cellar Doors, and I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. So much you give, yet so much you take. Most days I found a way to barely stay awake. They say do unto you as you have done to me. They say love the ones who close, even love those who deceive. You will try to find it right, catch your way back home. Through the trials and the miles of everyday's woes and dissatisfaction, and a better way to understand it. And I chose to walk alone, I chose what to see. Every time I hit a wall, I drown the tears within us all. I rip seams with shattered screams and left scars on wounded stars. I said friends to the end, I brought fools up to the stars. You will try to find it right, catch your way back home. Through the trials and the miles of everyday's woes, you defy what is right to justify your own desires. But all I wanted was a way to disappear in the fear. Years I spent falling out, giving in, looking far from you. Oh, yeah, yeah. Ooh, all for nothing. The burn of the sand into the soles of our feet. And I've been the finest wine, I've been the suds down on the streets. I'm gonna turn this mountain side into a walkable hill. I wanna thank you for our home. I wanna thank you for the meals. Thanks for listening, guys. Like I said, I hope that I can reach, even if it's just one person. Praise God. I love you guys. Until next time, peace, love, and rock and roll.